Hello again, and welcome to this episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. I'm your host and the editor of Guns Magazine, Brent Wheat. Well, for the second week in a row, we have to remember one of our writers. In the past week, Mark Hampton passed away while on safari in Africa, and just like last week where we remembered Duke Venturino, I called up Roy Huntington, and we had a few laughs, actually, thinking about Mark and the legacy that he lives. So let's talk to Roy Huntington and share some of our stories about Mark Hampton. Well, good morning, Roy.
Hello, sir. We find ourselves sitting here once again doing this.
I know, and it seems like whenever you're a guest, we kind of talk about that, but now we're literally doing the same thing we did last week, and
I know.
Who'd have thought, you know?
I know. So, twice in as many weeks. We're talking about a friend of ours who passed away.
Yeah. And got to say, this one was a shocker. We all kind of knew that Duke Venturino was in a bad way. Like I said, he was a classy guy, and he reached out to all of us and kind of, made his peace with all of us. And that was really cool. And Mark just literally out of the blue. He was, I just talked to him a couple of days ago. He was getting ready to go to Tanzania, and apparently he got there, and on day 2 of his hunt, he apparently had a heart attack. So at least that's what we're hearing, because the communications from the bush in Tanzania aren't exactly what they are here in the United States. So anyway, Mark has passed, and we need to talk about him. He certainly deserves it. I think, Roy, I think he was probably one of the most unsung or undersung big game hunters in the world at the moment when he passed. I mean, some of the things he's done, that he didn't pound his chest. He didn't make a big deal out of it. But wouldn't you agree? He was underappreciated when he was here.
Well, I think he was underappreciated by the shooting community. Because, I got to know Mark. I hired him in about 2001 to replace J.D. Jones to do the handgun hunting column, and J.D. had recommended him, and
that's saying something right there.
Yeah, exactly. But up until that point, Mark was kind of flying under the radar. He had done a little bit of writing, and I had seen his articles and things like that, but After I hired him and we got to know each other and became friends, then I realized the sort of depth of who he was. Yeah. And he is, and has always been, a single-minded handgun hunter in pursuit of very specific things around the world. Yeah. I don't know that there's a continent that Mark didn't hunt on. When I met him, I think he was at 22 trips to Africa.
Yeah.
And now I think he was up to 30 trips to Africa. And he didn't just kill for sport. It was actually very specific. It was trophy hunting. He was looking for specific things. But the thing that people don't understand about Mark is that he was hugely involved in the conservation side of hunting. He was a member of every major organization. He was the president of a couple of them. And in that side of the house, if you said Mark Hampton, everybody knew him.
Yeah.
And he was like the world famous handgun hunter, and I remember he told me some stories of being in Mongolia. It's like, who hunts in Mongolia?
Exactly.
For crying out, and Kazakhstan and all those other places that human beings don't ever go to. But invariably, he would get back from some hunt, and Mark would send me a picture of him with a 5-day beard growth and, 5 tired-looking tribal people from somewhere sitting up on the side of a godforsaken mountain, and he would have a dead goat.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I wish I had written it down. I asked him one time because he doesn't fit the stereotype of a world-traveling hunter. He's from Missouri. He's retired school superintendent. So, that's a reasonably well-paying job. But when you think of a guy that's hunting goat in Iraq, you tend to think of a guy that's high net worth. And Mark wasn't really that guy, but somehow he managed to put all that together. But I was also going to say that relates to his latest story that appeared in Guns Magazine, I believe, September. It's coming out, I think. It was, he called it the hardest hunt. He went and hunted the rainforest of Cameroon. And the pictures are stunning. First of all, he's hunting with a pygmy crew, literally pygmies. And there's one picture of him standing next to one, and the guy literally comes to like mid chest. And but the one that really grabs me, and I'll flash it up here on the screen, is he got his dwarf buffalo. And he's hunting. He took his wife Karen, and he even mentions, "I sure know how to show a gal a great time." But the cool thing is, when you look close, because we edit pictures, and I've got to get zoomed in and make sure everything's just right. They're in front of this buffalo, and you can see, I think Karen's got a fly on her. But when you look at this buffalo, the sparse hair on the hide, there's all these little dots, and you realize when you zoom in, it's ticks. And he's in the rainforest with this dead buffalo and thousands of ticks and his poor wife, Karen. What a guy, it's just unbelievable.
Well, it was funny because we got to know him really well, Susie and I, and we used to go to their farm. They're about 2 or 3 hours from us in Summersville, Texas County, I think it is, in Missouri. And so we stayed at their house, and we used to go hunt and do blind hunting for deer on their farm to call them, because there are always millions and millions and millions of them. But I used to laugh because we would go and look at pictures and stuff like that, and invariably, just as you say, there would be Mark in some godforsaken place, right, with these scary looking people with spears or AK-47s around him, and goats and pack mules or something, and then. There would be Karen, like her hair kind of messed up and sweaty maybe, but invariably they would have a toothy grin on and having a good time. And so I guess when she married him, she knew what she was getting into. I think I always ended up laughing when I talked with Mark. I mean, we were always laughing about things and stuff like that. But I want to stress to people too that just like Duke, he was just the darn nicest guy and polite. And when he used to come to the SHOT Show, he always wore a suit. We used to always kid him and said that he looked like an FBI agent, because he did. And he would come into the booth, and he would come to me and he'd say, Roy, can I help you with anything? Is there any places you need me to go? Do I need to talk to anybody? Just let me know. And then he would do the same thing with Randy from our office. And if anything was happening in the booth, he would be right on it, helping us. He was there when we broke down on Sunday on a few occasions, and he would take off his suit coat and, help us break down the booth and stuff. He was just always a gentleman. And as you say, he was very humble. You would never know he was as famous as he was, unless you kind of did the background research on it.
Well, I mean, he is famous and kind of his niche, but he's the kind of guy that if he'd had a much bigger ego or maybe a manager, he would have had like his own hunting shows on real TV. He would have had millions of dollars of product endorsement, but that wasn't Mark. He wasn't chasing that. He was chasing animals and promoting the conservation of it. The other stuff, I really think he only wrote and did all this simply kind of to pay the bills. Not that he didn't enjoy the writing, but I think it was just another way to help the end means, which was getting out in these unbelievable places and chasing animals. And another thing that I wanted to bring up before I forgot about this hunt in Cameroon was the story of him and the pygmy were sitting with a back up against a tree, calling in, I forget what animal. And he looked over, he said the pygmy got real wide-eyed and was looking past him. He looked over and there was a gorilla standing there like 10 yards away. Who has that experience while they're handgun hunting? So, but it just, he told the story without any embellishment, without any chest thumping, without even the whole, hey, look at me, look where I was and what we did. He just told the story. And I think that's probably one of the reasons for the folks that knew him, he was so endearing.
Well, he was just had no ego. And he wrote, I happen to know because I talked to him at length about it, he wrote because he wanted people to understand and to be enthusiastic about hunting in general, and specifically handgun hunting. And so that's why he loved passing on that information. Of course, now look how important it is. Mark has passed away, but we have this tremendous legacy of hundreds and hundreds of articles and several books. So I want to talk a little bit about something that people maybe don't know about, and I made some notes, and so forgive me, but I'm going to have to. I want to make sure I don't forget anything. I do know he wrote 3 books. The first one that I read he gave me was called "Addicted to Altitude: Confessions of a Mountain Hunter." Well, because he was Mr. Sheep, you know, and I don't know how he did it, because he was about my age. I mean, I think he was a year younger than me. I'm 69. I think he'd passed away when he was 68. Yeah. And when we used to visit him, he had like a treadmill in the living room. And I would say, you on the treadmill? He says, yeah, I got to hunt in, know where it stands somewhere. And there he is at 10,000 feet, hiking up the side of a mountain. It was amazing. He did a general book, which actually, maybe he wrote this one first. It was called Handgun Hunting. And if you can find these on Amazon and stuff like that, on eBay, you'll see some used copies. And it's a really good primer on everything you ever need to know about handgun hunting. And then he did another one called Handguns in Wild Places. And that one was really interesting, because what he did was, I forget, it was like 25 or 28 people talk about their handgun hunts in these wild places, and with pictures and the story, and Mark was sort of curated it and got it together and stuff. And so look for those books. Let's see, a couple of things. He was elected as a state representative in Missouri in 1998.
I'd heard that.
I know, it's like, really, I mean. And he taught at Summersville School District, which is just a tiny little county there. He started in 1979, and he was there for 23 years. He was a teacher, a coach, athletic director, a high school principal, and then he eventually retired as school superintendent. And that's where he met his wife, Karen, who was also a teacher there. And so those things happen. And this was something, because he sprung this on me one day. I was talking about the harbor unit that I used to work on. He said, yeah, I used to drive patrol boats. And I went, what? Well, he actually left teaching twice. Once he he became a Missouri State Water Patrol officer at the lakes of the Ozark.
Really?
But it was about this preservation and hunting and all that. That's what that was driving him.
Huh.
And then, of course, he worked as a state representative. And, and I wanted to bring this next point up, is that he had a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from the College of the Ozarks, and a master's and specialist degrees in educational administration from William Woods University. So, it's not like what you think. It's like, he's just a shooter. He's a handgun guy, No, Mark was actually really, really smart, and he was really well educated, and he was a delight to be around. When we were at the SHOT Show the last few years I attended with Mark, we stopped going out to fancy restaurants. And so what we would do is Susie and I would buy pizzas and invite people to our room. And so Mark was invariably a guest, and I remember one night Will Dabbs was there, Mark was there, Shannon Jackson, the PR person, and one or two other people, and what a delightful group. And what struck me, though, is that all through the evening, all Mark did was make sure we were taken care of. It was really funny. He was always getting more pizza, and Roy, do you need something to drink over there? Susie, can I help you with the, and it was like, Mark, sit down, eat some pizza.
Yeah, and our president, Randy Mulday, talked about when we sponsored the Masters, which was a big event in the shooting industry. And he said that Mark and Karen would always show up and not even ask, just start doing and working and lugging ammo and all that. And, Randy's like, we didn't bring you here for that. And he's like, no, it's what you do. It's good Midwestern values. You just pitch in and get the work done. But he wasn't a chest thumper about that kind of stuff. So. Oh no, because at the Shooting Industry Masters that he came to here, it was near us here in Missouri, and he and Karen showed up. And I don't think I even asked for his help. I think he just said, hey, that's within an easy drive. We'll show up.
And I wanted him to just sort of rub elbows and go around. He's, Mark Hampton, the famous guy, and all that kind of stuff. But you're right. Every time I looked at him and Karen, they're sweaty over carrying ammo or loading 22 magazines at the shooting stage. And it was, but that was really typical of Mark. And he had a really dry, wry sense of humor.
Yes.
There was one time we were hunting, and so Karen and my wife Susie would go in a blind somewhere. Mark and I would invariably be in a blind together, and he was, of course, the host. It was his farm, and he took really good care of us and make sure everything was there and stuff. And so, but we were in a blind one day, and it was getting toward dusk, and we wanted to shoot a doe. And I was using his gun, and he had this, I don't know what it was, this huge, bolt action single shot, pistol. And it was in some nuclear atomic caliber. I don't know, like 260, Nightmare or something. And he had fired it on a range to zero it, and he said, but this is the first time I've ever actually used it in a hunt. And so sure enough, it's getting pretty dusky out, like it's kind of getting time to not be hunting anymore. And a doe shows up, and he's looking, and he says, go ahead, shoot that doe. And so I remember we stuck the muzzle out of the blind, and I touched off, and this fireball came out about 3 feet wide and like 6 feet long. And it was unbelievable. And this deer just dropped like a ton of rocks. It was unbelievable. And so I was like wide-eyed and everything, and I couldn't see anything. And so I looked over like this to Mark, and he's there. He had binoculars, and he puts it down, looks at me, and he goes, "Oh my God!" He goes, And he said, I can see now that I probably won't be using this one in the field. But
wow.
So yeah, he was a pretty funny guy. One day he got a new camera system, and he needed some help, and so he said, would you come and help me? And it's only, like I said, 2-3 hours away. And he said, bring your dog too, because I had Scout. And I said, okay. So I threw Scout in my Pontiac Solstice, and we drove over there. For the next 2 or 3 days, he just, Scout was babied and coddled and play ball with, and, and we went all around. And, it was unbelievable. So he's going to leave a big, big hole here. Yeah. That's all there is to it.
And I was going to say, that's one of the remarkable things, too. Here's a guy who has hunted everything, including, the big five, and taken them with a pistol and all that, but he still loved turkey hunting and deer hunting on his farm. It's just, the guy loved to hunt. He loved to hunt. I know, because he would send me pictures of a buck and a doe that he and Karen got. And, proud, behind. And I remember I asked him to do like a roundup of 22 hunting pistols or something. And he told me later on, and it was because he did several articles or columns based on that. And he said, I'm not sure that I've had as much fun anywhere in the world as I had hunting squirrels, wow. Zeroing these guns, learning what optics to put on them, and you're right. It's just he was focused on that. And like you said, it wasn't about building his ego. It wasn't about building his fame. I think if someone had come to him and said, Mark, we want to do a TV series about you, which I'll bet you they did ask him. And I'll bet you he said, nah, probably.
I'm sure, because otherwise he would have been involved in it,
Yeah. What a great guy. And like you said, we'll just never fill his shoes, him and Duke Venturino. And, I was kind of sitting here thinking, I thought this when we talked about Duke, and now we're talking about Mark. The problem is filling the hole that they leave in the shooting community and hunting community. Guys that are so single-minded, and that's all they think about. They live for that. I got to be honest with you. I don't know that we make people like that anymore. What do you think?
It's a tough one because when Mark passed away, I called his wife Karen and did she need anything, and we were in communication. But after I hung up, I thought, well, now what? The handgun hunting column is, nobody I know can do that. Yeah. I mean,
nobody
I could talk
does
about
that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about shooting a deer in my backyard one time or something, but hunting in Afghanistan, really, I mean, hunting for a polar bear, and
with a handgun,
with a handgun, and something to think about too. Remember is that Mark actually wrote and talked a lot more about just the hunting side of things, because a lot of we joke about the hook and bullet, on that side, whether it's fishing and hunting, they have little interest almost in guns. It's like a lot of those guys own like one rifle, and that's what they hunt with. Mark was actually a lot more diverse than that, and so he actually understood guns, liked guns, reloaded, understood custom guns. And so I think that was one of the things that helped him to stand out, is that it's not just there I was out on the tundra. It's about, here's what the research I did. Here's why I got this gun. Here's how I zeroed it. And then I took it on this hunt, and so he painted a whole picture, rather than just a part of one. So. Well,
and his humbleness came through, that there was no secondhand chest thumping or, gee, look at me, look at what I'm doing, and all that. Just the guy that you saw in print was the guy that you saw in person, and that's pretty cool. Same with Duke too. But
neither one of them ever said, "Look how cool I am." Yeah. Other people said, "Gosh, that's really cool." And to me, that's maybe the ultimate compliment, kind of. Yeah. I mean, I used to call him up and congratulate him, or compliment him. He would send me a column in, and I'd say, "Hey, that was a pretty darn funny story right there." And he goes, "Well, I mean, are you sure? Do you need me to rewrite it?" And it's like, Mark, stop it. I remember he wrote me. I was at his house visiting, and he told me this story about he was somewhere wherever they have yaks. I don't know where that is for sure, but there's the Himalayas or so, I don't know where, right? And he was in a yurt, right? And he was telling me that the guy was offering him this like only special stuff for, was this like curdled milk with, goat poop in it or so, and Mark was telling me about, well, I was a guest there, and and I had to do this, and he said, and then whenever I didn't really want to eat this, but I kind of had to, right? Yeah. And then they were toasting, and everyone had to drink this vile, obnoxious, yak throw up beer, or something. Yeah. And Mark, what's funny was he said, yeah, they'd hand it to me, and as they were walking around doing it, he said, I'd dump it behind me, And he said, but then the problem was, and they would think I drank it, and they would come back and give me some more, right? Anyway, so he tells me this story, and I was laughing. I was like crying. I was laughing so hard. And I said, Mark, you just wrote your next column.
Yeah.
And he was funny. He said, really? You think people will even want to know about that? And I said, yes.
Yeah. And, that's what's so unusual about him. I won't say he was unsophisticated, because I think he was, but he was so unassuming and so down to earth. It's hard. On one hand, it's hard to imagine him dealing with the customs officials in Blankistan. But yet, on the other hand, one-to-one with his host and the guides and all that, I could see him, they probably didn't speak a common language, but he would ingratiate himself immediately and just be one of the guys.
Well, I went to Africa, I don't know, 8 years ago or so now, and part of the process is you have to get prior approval from customs on what you're taking over there. Mm-hmm. And that's to certify that you already own it before you leave, so that way when you come back in, you're not hit with import taxes or something like that. And so in Springfield here, there's a customs agent. And so I loaded my guns and binoculars and everything, movie cameras and stuff. And so I went there and met him in the office, and he's looking at me, and he goes, oh yeah, I think I know you. He said, you write in the magazines, right? And I said, yeah. And he said, oh, well, then you probably know this guy that I know. And I said, who's that? And he said, Mark Hampton. And see, because Mark uses the same customs guy.
Yeah.
Right? And I said, oh, Mark and I are old friends. Absolutely. He writes for me, and we're all friends. And you want to know what he said? He said, he is the nicest guy. He is always so polite when he comes here, and he always tries to be organized, and he doesn't ever want to put me out, Yep. And I said, that's Mark. you know?
It is.
So,
Well, you know, when you were talking about pitching stories, he would always end it with, if that's okay.
if that's okay. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
If that's okay. Yeah.
So,
Hey, I went on a dinosaur hunt and I got a triceratops, you know.
Yeah.
Would that be okay if I wrote that up? You know? It's like,
Exactly.
no, Mark. No, sorry. Nobody would want to know. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
I don't know, man.
You've
Yeah.
been to his house. Does he have like a lot of heads, or he doesn't strike me as a taxidermy guy, but
I don't know if I'm speaking out of turn here, but the first time we went to his house, he had the equivalent of like a really big 2-car garage, okay? And so we were there and we were laughing and stuff, and he gave me a glass of wine. He didn't drink, and but he gave me a glass of wine, and he said, well, let's go look at some animals. And I thought, oh, okay. And I'm thinking, you know, some deer heads up on the wall or something like this. So we go into this place, and it looks like a museum.
oh, wow.
I mean, it was dozens of spectacular mounts.
Yeah.
You know, now remember, because these are world-class animals, and
Yeah.
so you know, sheep and a polar bear, and I mean, it just you name it, there
Yeah.
they were. It
Wow.
was breathtaking, you know, and so now this was a lifetime from him, right? You know, we're looking at 40 years or so, or more than that maybe. And so we're looking, and he's telling stories about different things, and the depth of his knowledge and the depth of his experience, but the depth of his humbleness, like you say, but all showed through. And but I have to say, when we're kind of all done, and we sat down, and he looked at me and he goes, "You think it's too much?" So I will say, though,
I can see that. Yeah.
that he got rid of it all, and I'm not sure
Really?
if he passed it on. You know, I don't think he sold it. I think he like donated it to schools, and
No kidding.
I'm pretty sure that's what happened. Because the next after that, when we went out there, he had a photo studio set up in there. You know, they were all gone. But I kind of understand. It's like, okay, I've seen all that. I've had enough. You know.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
well, you know, I'm pleased to see that we were laughing a lot, because I know that would please him. You know. So.
Exactly. Well, I kind of feel like you were dreading this a little bit, because these things, we got a letter after our last one. The guy said, you know, it's easy to get sappy and melancholy, and you guys didn't. So I took that as a huge compliment, because both of these guys are the kind of people that they really want you to laugh, you know, because that's the kind of people they were. So I'm glad we could have a good time and tell these stories, and kind of picture Mark sitting back, just taking it all in, and got that little grin of his.
Oh, it's really funny. Yeah, because it was he laughed at himself more than anything.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it was like all the time. He'd say, "You think that was stupid?" You know, whatever I just did. You know, or but then he would, and you've seen this, I'm sure, is that, you know, you get a note from him saying, "Hey, I'm going to, you know, Blevikstan, you know, to go goat hunting, and I'll be gone for 6 weeks." It's like, okay, bye. Yeah.
That was literally his last communication to me, about 5 days before he passed. So just one of those little notes. I'm just zipping over to Tanzania. You know, he was going to probably hunt something that only 5 biologists have ever heard of, but just what kind of guy he was. Well, Roy, how about I don't mind doing these, and it's nice to celebrate people, but let's not do any more for a while. Is that okay?
Boy, I'll tell you, take a break. You know what this has caused me to think about, though, too, is number one, is that everybody who we work with are these kind of guys.
Yeah.
You know, really. And I'm not just saying that from people listening to think that we're, you know, no, it's absolutely the truth. And I think you talk to any readers who communicate with our writers, because they all respond to people, but they're all like this, you know. And the other thing crossed my mind is that, why don't we do this same thing, but for our writers who are still alive?
That's a good point.
You know?
Yeah.
It's like, let's talk about the characters we have that we've known for so many years, and tell these stories and embarrass the snot out of them, you know, while they're still
that
here.
Would be
so
good.
Yeah, so
maybe
let's
we need
do
to
that.
do that.
Yeah, let's do that, and then we'll show some embarrassing pictures, and we'll find some pictures of them from 35 years ago in the magazine where they're wearing flared.
You've done that before with certain guys, and it's awful.
Striped bell-bottom pants, and long hair. So,
well, you make a great point that I and a friend of mine who maybe you can figure out who I'm talking about, but we'll be having an adult beverage and kind of sit back and say, think about all the incredible people we've met, famous and not famous, but the famous ones, who by the time we got to meet them, they were legends, literally. And then the more you're in this industry and some of those folks pass, you wonder, did they know, at least before they went, that they were legends? And we're now in that era where we're on a first name basis with a lot of these guys. And, I really saw it with Duke Venturino, how many people watched and commented, and obviously how many people he has reached out in his life that literally think he's a legend. And it's like, wow, it's amazing to me that I've got to play. I got to be with the cool kids in the cool kid class, and pretty magical. You're right. I still do it. Is that if I call Will Dabbs and he goes, "Oh, hey Roy, how are you today, sir?" He's another really polite guy. But or I used to call Mike Venturino or Mark Hampton or Masad Ayub or Dave Anderson or John Taffin or the list goes on, and I hang up and I go, holy crap, I just was talking to Mike Venturino. Yeah. I feel like a little kid sometimes. So, Well, I got to say, when you called me, and I've told this story a couple times, literally one afternoon, and it's about this time of year, it was in late July, you called me out of the blue and essentially offered me this job. And the sense of amazement I had, it was like, I can't believe I get to do this. And, you look at some of the names that have been the editor of Guns Magazine, and then I get to edit all those guys you were just talking about. And now I'm on a first name basis and friends with them. I will say, Duke and Mark passing kind of rekindled some of that I'm just stunned and amazed I get to do what I do. And thank you to our audience, because if we didn't have an audience, nobody was going to pay us to do this. So, it really rekindled my appreciation for all the folks I work with, for you, Roy, for the job I have and the history of all this together. So that's about as maudlin as I'll get, but it really does. It's that gut check moment where it makes you kind of appreciate what you got.
Well, these guys have this impact even after they pass away. I mean, you figure Mark has brought us together to do this, to talk, to reminisce, to, talk about essentially what is his legacy. And I think, to me, Mark's legacy is that, be a good guy, be a gentleman, do your job, show up, don't complain, because that's how he was, and follow your passion, Yeah. I mean, I think there are definitely people who wouldn't understand Mark's drive to do this, but I admire it. That he chose a course and he stayed that course, and I think the fact that he died doing what he loved so much is like, I hope we all can get that. So
yep. What a great guy, Mark Hampton, and of course we mentioned Duke Venturino several times, and hopefully we won't have to do this anymore. But Roy, I appreciate you coming on, and we got through this just fine. And for the viewers, tell us your memories and your thoughts on either one of those great gentlemen. And we always like to see that. Like I said, Roy really follows the YouTube comments a lot. And of course, you can reach me, editor@gunsmagazine.com. Tell me some of your reminiscence about Mark Hampton, and we'd love to hear that. So, Roy, we got through it. We're done. Now let's move on to more fun stuff in the next episode. So thanks for joining me.
All righty, buddy. Thank you.
It was great sharing some memories about Mark Hampton with Roy Huntington, and we'd like to hear some of your remembrances of Mark. You can leave us a comment below or reach me at editor@gunsmagazine.com. Well, that's it for this episode. Before we go, I would remind you, please check out gunsmagazine.com, AmericanHandgunner.com, and AmericanCop.com, and please mash that like and subscribe button so that we can keep bringing you great content here from the Guns Magazine podcast. Well, on behalf of everybody that works here at FMG Publications, I'm Guns Magazine editor Brent Wheat, reminding you once again, now get out there and get shooting.